It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. I know I'm telling a long story on this, but I promise you this will make the listeners all the more appreciative of what's happening. So Bob Iger's biggest problem as CEO of Disney, and this is documented a million times over. So in 2014, when I had this tour, this was brought up on, because we also stayed as guests afterwards, we took other tours. This was brought up no less than 15 times from conversations I heard, whether I was on a tour or just other conversations among people. Who is going to replace Bob Iger? Who's going to, when he steps down? Because at that time he had been in charge for approximately 10, 12 years. And he was at an age that he said he was allegedly looking at. At the time in 2014, Disney had three amazing people that any one of them would have continued on what Iger was doing and probably taking it in a much better place.
Do you remember who they were?
The only one I can remember offhand is, I believe, Trapp, T-R-A-P-P. I think he was in, well, so one of the things Iger did is he kept on switching people's places. So like if you were in charge of parks, you would then go in charge of media, and then he would switch them. And I think Trapp specifically had a great record in the parks. And then media and stuff, he was making some of the things. I think he was actually, I don't know this. I say don't quote me, but I'm on a podcast. If I'm correct, he was actually the progenitor for what eventually became Disney Plus. He's the one that pitched that initial idea.
Interesting.
But that was 2014. Bob Iger officially stepped down in February, March 2020. So that was 6 years, and that was a long 6 years. So all those guys left. They hired a whole bunch of new people. Those guys were supposed to be the new Bob Iger. Those guys left. And then it basically came into Disney was starting to get pretty hostile with the board, was getting pretty hostile with Iger. And they basically said, you have less than a year to leave. And even then, and that was supposed to be November 2019. He said, I need just a little bit more time. And they're like, you have till March or you have till February. So he was not a fan at all. And Bob Chapek, the one who eventually took over, is really a weird hire on multiple levels, but and we've seen that over the past 2 years, why that's 2.5 years, why that was a weird hire.
So is he actually Iger's protege and mentee?
No,
because they, that's been kind of a question that I feel
even at the time,
I feel it's very not, I guess, clarified in a lot of the public writing about that.
The best relationship they had was Iger playing his role of trying to say like, oh no, Disney's in good hands.
Yeah. Okay.
But he was not, Chapek was never on, Chapek and Chapek's people were never on Iger's list of people to even be in Disney. Like he did not hire Chapek. That was a board decision to hire Chapek into Disney, into the things. Chapek has always been a fairly controversial figure within Disney, even before the CEO role and stuff. And it was also, even when Chapek got the job, it was a huge like blow. People were like, wait a minute, Chapek?
Why?
Because this is, because the kinds of policies and the confrontations that we've seen over the past 2.5 years have always followed him, specifically in his Disney career.
Interesting.
So what's funny is it's only 3.5 months, 3.5 months into Chapek's career when the thing that basically got him fired is what happened. So his big fallout with Scarlett Johansson regarding Black Widow, that is ultimately what led to his ouster. That is
because she wanted to be paid the same, correct?
Because she had a contract, and he broke the contract by like, I understand Disney's perspective of issuing on Disney Plus the movie, but they didn't go and try to make a new contract of saying like, hey, you're going to get so much of the money from Disney Plus, because at the time it was when they were still trying to test out like, hey, you pay $30 on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah, because it was released digitally and not.
Yeah, and it was released digitally at the exact
theaters.
same time as it went to the theaters. Of course, it was
Yeah.
a limited release, and then the limited release on which theaters got it, and then on top of that, which theaters were open.
So her Carrie got totally smashed.
They and based on Shang-Chi and Free Guy and some other movies that have come out in the same kind of time frame of the type of movie, there's a good thing of saying that they lost probably about $400 million on the picture as far as the theater release. Now, Disney Plus did actually make up more than $400 million, but that was not part of the contract for Scarlett Johansson of where she could get her earnings.
Yeah, and she probably gets at least 5% of that royalty off that $400 million.
Well, that's part of that was the whole debate of whether or not they had to pay her off of that because it wasn't part of the contract. Because originally, Black Widow was supposed to have been released in 2019.
Interesting,
but they delayed it because of some other stuff they're trying to do with the MCU.
So she probably lost $10 to $25 million off that whole.
Yeah, probably between 50 and 100 million.
Oh, wow.
What they're saying. And also on top of that, it reduced her earning capabilities because Chapek called her out, basically saying that she's not the kind of person people want to work with. So for a few months, it actually limited her opportunity to even get in with other studios. And Iger was pissed about it even then, but Iger had just officially moved out of all of his roles right at the time that this started. Then... And what you referred.
So is he like a super aggressive, like?
Yes, he's very blunt.
Jack Axeman, Jack Welch, sort of.
I don't know enough about Jack Axeman. What I know of Welch is mostly from his own book, so I won't pretend that I can speak to that. But he, I would say, the way that the whole Florida deal about the gay stuff. How he handled that was probably the most tactful he's ever been at Disney. And he handled that horribly. Where Florida passed a new law about whether or not basically you can't teach anything about like the gay community and stuff in schools. You can't do any kind of promotion of this. This happened just May of 2021, just to give it a context for it. And Disney was, of course, horrified because Disney's Florida's biggest moneymaker, multiple as far as tourism and stuff. And tourism, Orlando makes 98% of all of their profits through tourism. Florida as a whole makes about 60 to 75% of their state income comes from tourism. And Disney is a majority of that. And there's a whole other side that if you ever want to talk about Universal versus Disney and stuff, it's actually really cool, interesting wise. But basically, Disney is a big deal. Well, when DeSantis basically said, we're going to come at you, Disney, you're going to lose some of your protections and stuff. Chapek handled every single step of that wrong. And when he did respond, he waited too long to respond. And he didn't say things that made the employees feel good. Chapek was always looking at cutting people and raising prices, which in a whole might not be a big deal, but when you're coming into parks and stuff, we're going to see what happens. This is so right now.
So how does it change now that Iger is back in?
Well, this is going to be this. So Chapek was removed on Sunday, November. I don't have a calendar from me. Number 19th.
Yeah, it doesn't 18th.
Matter. And Iger came in as CEO. Iger has a 2-year contract, and his number one thing is he has to have a successor before his contract is gone. This is the reason. So he's
basically recorrecting the board's error to do what should have happened years ago.
Yes and no.
So he's not picking his successor. Well, he's picking one for the board.
That's the question. And this is why the Apple thing is interesting. Apple is struggling right now on the streaming side, not because they don't offer a good product, but because there's so much out there. And what Apple is doing is kind of a version of what Amazon is doing, where you can watch Showtime shows through Apple, but Apple does it for every platform. So you can pay basically to rent a show or a movie or something through Apple, but it actually pays Hulu or it pays Amazon or it pays Netflix. And they're doing it for everybody, whereas Amazon only has certain contracts with certain people, specifically based on subscription.
Yeah.
So one of the guys at my work, he has Hulu account, but he looks up all his stuff on Apple. So this is actually a really cool thing. Again, I mean, you guys can already see why this is cool.
Yeah.
But Apple does not have the money to produce content. They don't have a library of previously done content. So, I think when Amazon bought MGM, they're buying all James Bond movies and basically 80 years of biggest movies that there are. And I think that's a good point. Like Apple, the premium technology company, buying the premium content library that exists just seems like in the way that iTunes innovated kind of like that content delivery mechanism originally. This seems like basically kind of like the new iTunes to have a pull point to bring them to like that general marketplace. Also, and I didn't mention this earlier and I forgot to, I apologize, because I'm not reading this off a script or notes or anything. This is from memory. And Iger stated when Steve Jobs died, a couple years after Steve Jobs died, that had Steve Jobs not have died when he did, that Apple and Disney probably would have already been merged. So yeah, I was just watching your reactions, both kind of like tell me like, oh crap, So this is so would Steve Jobs be the CEO of Disney then? Possibly. I mean, there's too much to. That's so long ago now because that was 2010 when he died. So this is okay. Now this is where my conjecture comes in. Now some of this is influenced by articles written, and unfortunately I don't have the articles at my hand. But one of the things is Iger has a fairly big ego on himself as well. That's one reason why he took over 10 years to name a successor. Oh wait, he didn't name a successor. Disney's bringing him in to fix Chapek's mistakes. And like one of the things right now, so in 2014, they raised the price of tickets to Disney World to Magic Kingdom to $109 a day if you don't buy any packages. Currently, it's $159 a day. In 2 weeks, it's going to be $189 a day if they don't change it. And every package is going up. And this is a tremendous increase because it took
that's a lot.
Almost 20 years to go from $90 to $100. So there's a reason why this is huge money. And Chapek even basically said we're raising the prices to keep a certain kind of people out. Yeah, that was kind of that was kind of the final. Well, it's the fact that he said it and he implied that it was basically stereotypical Floridians. It's funny, but it's like, I mean, this is completely serious. And that's again where his tact was wrong. So Iger is now put in a position, and Iger's ego was just as strong as Eisner's was. He could be the last Disney CEO. He's known as the great CEO because basically all he did was buy intellectual properties from everybody else. He's a great corporate manager. If Apple buys it, he's going to get a huge paycheck. Disney's going to win on this. Apple will probably win a little bit on this. It makes sense based on their history and everything. If he has to find a successor, one, he only has 2 years. He doesn't have the time to do the traditional grooming where you might have 5 to 10 years to groom someone. And the good kind of grooming, not the bad kind of grooming. If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewNextPodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.